Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning! Johnny Sexton has made it!
Do you feel moderately happy?
No, I feel like I've been kissing my sister, I suppose.
In the pocket for his drop goal attempt. Here he goes, O'Gara. He's done it! That surely is the Grand Slam.
We target players all the time. That's part of rugby, isn't it? Let me know.
Sexton, wonderful pass and Stockdale finishes.
There'll be more than grenades. There'll be full tanks and full shells landing on the Aviva.
Grand Slam winners on St Patrick's Day at Twickenham.
So you're welcome along Wednesday Night Rugby. We have Keith Wood in studio, everybody.
There you go.
Excitement at fever pitch around the office. Keith Wood here in the flesh.
Yeah, hardly excitement. We get past that very, very quickly, I think, Joe.
And Eddie O'Sullivan, you're there?
Yep.
Oh, very nice. Geez, you've changed tack.
Just changed rooms.
Very nice.
That's a much nicer room, Eddie. I think you should stay there in future. Much better.
This is actually a hologram. If I back up here, the whole thing falls apart. It's just like those corner sets, you know.
Well, at the moment it looks fantastic. So, as you can imagine, at Carton House this afternoon, all the talk was of Sean Cronin. So, Robbie Henshaw pretty much confirmed now a dead leg. He's going to miss the game at the weekend. Dan Levy's calf is not going to be ready in time. And Ross Byrne is into the squad, given Joey Carberry's injury situation as well. But Sean Cronin's omission is the big talking point. Just to kick things off, here's Simon Easterby. He was speaking to the press this afternoon explaining Cronin's omission from the 37-man squad at Carton House this week.
Listen, there'll be lots of things that players will be unhappy about in games. You know, they're their worst critics in terms. Listen, there'll be lots of things that players will be unhappy about in games. You know, they're their worst critics in terms of their performance. I think Sean has gone pretty well. There'll be a couple of lineouts that went astray, and some of them are strategy. That there's so many elements to a lineout that maybe from the outside you look at it and go, oh, it's a lost lineout. But actually, when you look at what happens in a lineout, there's so many combinations. If you get one of those things wrong, one element of the lift, the jump, the throw, the movement, then it's probably the hooker that gets a little bit of the pressure. So I'd say we've been pretty happy with Sean and what he's produced prior to coming in and while he's been in camp. And again, I'll come back to it. It's about the opportunity to develop some depth in that position. And what happened in the Italy game was, I hold my hand up, a little bit of strategy that didn't quite go our way. The opposition read a couple, and that sometimes is the case. And unfortunately, when it's just looking at pure figures and what you guys see, you just maybe pick on one thing, and the line out is it's more complex than that.
So, thoughts? I'm surprised, first of all, that Cronin's out. Rob Herring, by the way, called up. I'm surprised Cronin's not in a 37-man squad at Carton House.
Well, I'm interested in some of the comments of Simon, and I think if he'd nailed all his lineouts, they wouldn't be looking for strength and depth. He'd be part of the strength and depth. And though I did when it was funny, however, I just hadn't fully taken a full view of it. When he ran out onto the field, I was looking at him saying, this is the chance for Cronin to maybe push Rory Best, to guarantee he'd be number two, though he's been number two pretty much, for an awful long time. He's got a huge number of caps off the bench. Yeah, and then I looked and said, no Devon Toner, no James Ryan. And I said, that's harder. And when the first ball sails over the top, or the ball down near in the 22, and I know someone said, look, they weren't even jumping against him. That's irrelevant. He still is throwing to a point of where it needs to be at the apex. And when that doesn't happen, and in my view that didn't happen because the lift was wrong. Now, but the ball may have been too early.
Why is that your view? What did you see that made you think that?
Because there was no hold up at the top of the lift. It seemed to go up and straight down again. So for me, that just didn't seem to have been set right.
Okay. So if there's a bit of hang time, that generally is a good sign the lift has been good.
Absolutely, and because they're held at the top, it isn't just to get you up to a height that's that fraction of a second. It can't be just that. So, but the knock on from that is, the next time there's a line out, Sean Cronin says, are they going to be where they're supposed to be? Did I overthrow the last one, or did they not get there? And it's that little bit of doubt. And I know this because I've had fans say it to me my whole career, you know, when I missed the odd throw, and we know it was an awful lot more than an odd one missed, to say that, look, it isn't that hard, it's just throwing something at a spot over there and you should be able to do that. Mm-hmm. It is not simple like that, and there's an awful lot of variation, and you want to have the confidence that the people will be where they said they'd be. It's funny, I would have Mick Galway, who should probably buy John Hayes a pint every day for the rest of his life, because he extended his career, because John Hayes was a magnificent line-out lifter, and Mick wasn't the tallest, but actually Mick was a great guy to throw to, because his setup was incredibly consistent and he was a very good footballer. And if there was a deviation for a foot or 2 feet in front or too high or whatever, he had a great athletic ability once he was off the ground to be able to manoeuvre to get it. So he was a great guy to throw to, and there was a comfort in that. And you know, because we hear it all the time, there's a comfort to having Devon Toner in the team. Because he's a big target for the ball, and I feel for him. I think he has gone down the pecking order because of that game. And it's like, people say rugby, everything is fair. It's not fair. Rugby is brutal on so many different levels. But when you get a chance, you can have luck and get a chance when somebody's injured, and it's unlucky for them but lucky for you, and you take it, and suddenly you jump up 2 or 3. But if things don't go right, or if there's system failures, as Simon Easterby reflected on there, that can just affect you and your confidence. And so I think it's tough.
Simon Easterby talks about system failures, Eddie, and yet the fact remains Sean Cronin's not in the squad, so clearly they are pointing the finger at him to some extent. Are you surprised, first of all, that they've done this? 2 games left in the Six Nations, effectively, 2 competitive games before a World Cup. This is tough on Cronin's confidence, I would presume. By all accounts, he is someone that from time to time can suffer with his confidence, like all of us, I'm sure. This is a major blow to him. Do you suddenly just bring him back for a World Cup?
Well, I wouldn't say he's out of the World Cup reckoning, but he hasn't helped himself. I think if you look at the lead up to the game, he's always had little question marks about his throwing. He's never been regarded as the best line-out thrower. And he has at times gone astray with Leinster. I think, as Woody pointed out there, the loss of Devon Toner was huge, because Toner's been the one stable in our line-out when we've gone really well in the line-out. He's a massive target. And even, on a bad strategy call, he'll get you out of jail. He's so big. So he went into a game where he was under pressure. He knew this was his big chance. His line-out throwing isn't his forte. He's had a couple of wobbles before, and probably the best target he'd ever have to throw to, who's the same at Leinster, wasn't there. So it's under huge pressure. And unfortunately, it went askew for him, And I know Simon's probably trying to be, I suppose, a bit diplomatic about this, but the truth of the matter is, I agree with Woody. If he'd hit all his line-outs, he'd probably be still there, and that's the ruthlessness of the business. Does it mean he's now out of the reckoning for the World Cup? No, because I think Joe Schmidt always saw him as an impact player, and maybe wanted to see, could he start him in a game? Now, that might be questioning after last weekend, whether he could start him in a game, but he still might want him in the World Cup. He's going to have to bring 3 hookers. He might still bring him as an impact player, but he certainly hasn't raised his share value, that's for sure, and that's got to be worried for him, because, to be fair, he's been hanging in there fighting year after year to try and establish himself, and he's been behind Rory Best, which isn't easy. But I think he certainly hasn't, let's put it this way, raised his share value last week, and that's why I think he's now not in the squad.
But maybe all the more reason actually to nurse him back to health. Arm around the shoulder. Sean, we understand what went wrong, we understand why it went wrong. Devon Toner's a much better option. Do you know what? Put it behind you. You're on the bench again for the French game. You're going to come on, you're going to have a great 20 minutes. You're a part of this squad.
Well, yeah, that's a nice conversation, but it's maybe not a realistic one, because he would have been back in training. They would have talked to him. I'm sure he's had conversations with Simon. You know, it's not like he just suddenly finds out he's not in the squad. There would have been conversations, but the question marks are, there might have been conversations before the game as well. This is your chance to go in and nail your lineouts. You know, so we're all speculating this, but I think there's been a conversation with him before, during and after, and the notion that, like, put the arm around his shoulder is great. It's a nice thing to do, but we're in a pretty harsh business. If he goes out on Saturday in a huge game, or Sunday, a huge game against France, where he best goes down early, he gets on the field and the lineup goes askew against France, you know, they're the risks involved if a guy is not in the zone, and his confidence can't be high after the last game. So I'd be fair to Joe Schmidt or Simon Eastwood that they're trying to give a sense of insurance around the line-out, and they feel that Sean's not right at the moment. So I think that's the call. And it would be nice to put the arm around his shoulder and tell him he'll be great. But there's a bit of that he's to go off and fix as well. This is not something new for him. It's something that's been there for a while. So I don't understand. It's harsh, but it's reality. And that's what he said. It's a tough business. And there are risks with trying to rehabilitate him next weekend against France. And those risks might not be worth the overall cost if the line-out went askew again.
Yeah, I accept that. I have heard through the grapevine he is a player who might appreciate a bit of reassurance. He is that type of player. But I also accept what Eddie's saying. We don't know what conversations have been had, but it's a pretty dark time for him.
I remember having a conversation with a very senior player, actually, and a long time ago, and we were having a discussion about confidence players. I don't know any player that isn't a confidence player. They want things to go right. They want to play well. Some have a better way of dealing with it when things don't go well. At different times there is an arm around the shoulder. At different times there's a bit of a rollicking. That's the nature of sport and life, probably. You don't go into an appraisal at work and expect your boss to say lovely things about you all the time. You want to hear the things that for you to get better. And that's something that's essential, and things that you can work on to make it right. And
that said, sorry to interrupt, this is an extra step. Now, you're out of a 37-man squad as opposed to you need to work on this.
The last bit that you could say for Simon, I like and listening to him, and he is a proper straight talker, and I felt that was kind of as hard, almost an interview you could have with him, is what happens the next time they go in there. Do we have a fourth person? Do we have a viable alternative? And Herring did well in the summer, and this is maybe an opportunity again. So there is merit in that. It just looks very hard because Sean has been waiting in the wings for so long. You know, so 68 caps of, I don't know how many starts is he, 4 starts. That was his first start in a Six Nations game. Like, this isn't anything new. You know, if you only get so many chances, he has had a lot of chances. So he is. I think he will get one more chance this side of the World Cup, and in that chance, he needs to knock it out of the park.
Yeah, because his domestic form, as we all know, has been so good for Leinster this year. I mean, he's in running for, he's on the shortlist for Player of the Year, European Player of the Year. How do you compare him and Scannell? How do you compare their domestic form? Like what Scannell is doing compared to what Sean Cronin's doing?
I think, you see, I think when we go back to it again, the difficulty is comparing like with like. When a guy gets a chance to play for his country and he's say fantastic, but he's playing with guys who are not the best in that position, it's hard. You know, that is always hard. You know, it's very hard to see the full value with it. It's why you try not to change too many players all the time. I think Eddie will have a view on that. You want to see how players operate. You drop in a guy who's shy in confidence with guys who are top of their game, you have a better chance of seeing where it is, because it isn't exactly like with like.
Yeah.
I think Scannell has played pretty well this year. I think he'd like to be playing an awful lot better. I think if we were to be honest, hooker is our position where it's one of the highest levels of scrutiny in the game is now at hooker, because all the opposition coaches are able to dissect every element of the line-out and tidy it up for the line-out jumpers to be able to target the hookers that they're playing against. There are only so many variations you can have. Now, there are many variations, but they're ones that players are very comfortable and confident with. So I think all of our hookers have been put under huge pressure this year. And there's a fairly old age profile as well. And you need to make certain that we have enough of guys with confidence. So I think I really think it's a tough call.
I think it's tough. For all the reasons you discussed, I mean, this was not an easy game to go into. Eddie, what's the pecking order at the moment then, in your view?
Well, it's hard to say, actually. I know Rory Best is number one. Like, that's... Well, I wouldn't disagree with that either. I mean, there's a Joe Schmidt's pecking order, or what myself and Woody might come up with. That might differ, but I think definitely Rory Best is number one, although he's been under pressure a bit as well. And I think Scannell probably is number two, but I think Herring is not. There's not much in it. They're both solid. I think the thing that Cronin, that differentiates Cronin from the other players, is his capacity in carrying the ball. He's incredibly explosive, and his big impact for Ireland, in particular, is when he comes off the bench with 15, 20 minutes to go on. The defence is a little bit tired, and suddenly he skins somebody on the outside. And he's like an outside back when he gets the ball in that last 15 minutes of the game. And he's had huge impacts off the bench, when you consider. But he has become very much a bench player.
Yeah.
And so I think they're different hookers, as Woody said. They're different guys. They bring different sets.
So are we sort of inching towards saying that he's not going to start, but he's going to be on the bench, and then the others?
But I always felt that, Joe. I always felt Joe Schmidt saw him as an impact player off the bench, and that's been his MO. I think the start was a chance for him to really put his, let's call it, mask, and it hasn't worked out for him. But I think he could miss the flight to Japan, but I sense that you'd want a guy like him there, in a certain situation. But, I mean, Scannell is a very solid player. He's reliable. He gets the work done. I think Herring is quite similar to that. There's not much in them. They're very similar players.
Okay.
But I think that was the one thing that Cronin brought, was that electric pace that a hooker has, like Woody-esque in his old days, But,
well, he needs to look. If this is maybe the last shot across the bow before the World Cup, he just needs to make certain that he rectifies if there's a glitch in his throwing. He needs to rectify that and make certain that actually because I have to say, coming on with 20 minutes to go, with what he brings to the game, I think he's a phenomenal rugby player. I really, his pace is incredible. His ability to score tries is incredible. And you do need something that does something different. So I think you need, and maybe this is part of what they're saying in the Irish camp, maybe they're saying, what if? So what if Rory Best doesn't get to the World Cup?
Yeah.
What do we do then? Do we start with Rory Scannell or Herring and still have Sean Cronin coming off the bench? Is that the sort of story? And it could well be, and that could be part of it.
Yeah.
Look, I think the game has gone, and we talk about it or don't talk about it very often. There's an element of luck involved.
Sure.
And if I look at Dylan Hartley in England, he couldn't be moved from his position for a long time.
Yeah.
Then he gets injured. George gets a run of games, and now you're not talking about Dylan Hartley anymore. But he got a run of games, and he struggled a little bit. But his first run was with the Lions, and he got his confidence up, and then he got a run with England.
Yeah, confidence is important. Yeah. So the French come here with a bit of confidence, you'd have to say. Ramos at 15 against Scotland last day out, and Uge back on the wing, and Ficau and Baster on the centre, and then Dupont, who a lot of people think is a really fantastic player, and Intimac, players in their proper positions, and things went reasonably well. And for the first time in his tenure, Jacques Brunel has stuck with the same 15 and the same 23. The word seems to be Bernard Laporte gave them a talking to after Twickenham, and then was on the training ground for the subsequent week in the build-up to the Scotland game. Probably had a say in selection, so we don't know what dynamics are going on behind the scenes. But they've stumbled upon at least something, Keith, as they come to Dublin. They're going to be a tougher challenge than they might have been at the start of this championship, that's for sure.
The dynamics don't seem to matter a jot when you deal with France.
Not process orientated.
In all the different World Cups, there was player revolts left, right, and centre at different times, and disagreeing with Marc Lièvremont and Philippe Saint-André. Their teams were kind of not quite functioning fully behind the scenes. I don't know if that really matters. What they looked like the other day was they looked fit, fresh, because they weren't playing a fully structured game. I think when it becomes incredibly structured and very hard hitting and not getting over the gain line, I don't know that it's anything to do with fitness. I just think their joy diminishes and they struggle somewhat. Scotland gave them loads of opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. Scotland were missing, bereft of their main strike talent in the back line, and they made mistakes that they just did not need to make. They kind of gave a beaten team opportunities to grow in confidence, and in fairness to France, they took that with both hands. And I thought they played really well, and I thought it was a joy to watch. I would be wary of them, and I know that they have the capacity to cause you a huge amount of hassle, but I wouldn't be afraid of them. I think their confidence is fairly shallow, and I know that our confidence is low, so it brings it much closer, but I would still have a higher level of confidence in how we'll function at the weekend.
Yeah, our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, Team of Us, everyone in, and we're live on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope at the moment. Send us your thoughts or questions, and you could be our Heineken Star Comment of the Week, win yourself some nice prizes. Invariably, Eddie, it's hard to get past the viewpoint that if Ireland play anywhere well, or close to well, they'll win this game, and obviously we're all very interested in the Irish performance at this stage. What are you expecting from Ireland? What are you going to be looking out for in those initial 5-10 minutes to see where this Irish team is?
Well, I think kind of the areas that we've seen the last couple of games, that if we don't win collisions, we struggle to get a rhythm on our game. Whether we can win collisions against France is debatable. I think they're quite athletic, so if we run straight into them, they'll be fired up, and we may not win collisions. We have to be a little bit more creative. I think their defensive system, like all French defense systems are, they make it up as they go. So if you can have a little bit of ingenuity, you can pull them apart, I think. I think, as Woody said, they have a soft underbelly. The French confidence is a false confidence. So it wouldn't take much to pull the thread and unravel them. But at the same time, I think we're a little bit short in confidence as well, and we need to get the first blow in. We need to get them to doubt themselves. Because if they click, as we know they can, then it gets very difficult. So I suspect what I'd like to see from Ireland is probably a little more ingenuity with the ball, not just running down blind alleys. I thought we seem to be good at times from the first few phases. We've a set play. We saw it against Italy, where we had a hit up off a line, we go back short side. Murray's the first receiver, out the back to Sexton, there's a wraparound out the back, all off the training field, and we make 15 metres with Kilcoyne up the touchline, 20 metres up touchline, and then we come back into 5-1 off runners, and we lose the gain line on all of them. And, that's the kind of stuff that we're not, when we have a momentum, we're losing it. So I think we've got to go out and get some momentum, and we're good at that offset pieces, but keep the momentum during phases and make France work, and other than just tackling us. And I think if we can do that, we'll pick them apart. And if we don't go into the mistake-ridden mess we had in Italy as well, we threw a lot of ball on the ground unnecessarily. So I think that's the tricky part. If things start to go wrong for us, the question marks from players' heads will come back. If things go well for us, I think we'll kick on and win. And I think the time is now. They have to put this performance together. Like Italy was the one after Scotland, and that didn't happen. Now it's got to be France. So it has to be France. We don't want to be going to Cardiff, and I've been saying this for weeks. We don't want to go into Cardiff nervous, because that's not a good place to go when you're nervous. So I think we've got to show some variety, and we've got to be very accurate as well. And I think if we get a couple of scores up on this French team, they'll pack their tent and go home.
Yeah.
I don't think they're where they think they are, and I think they even know that themselves, and they won't admit it.
Yeah. Just one last quick question, because there's other things I want to talk to you about. You described there those patterns of play, and Ireland get to a certain point up the pitch and then are reduced to one-off runners and they lose momentum. Were they doing that last year as well? It's just the one-off runners were getting over the gain line, or has something changed at that point in play?
We were very effective last year in those collisions, but teams have figured us out. And if you go back historically with us, if you go back 2 years ago on Murrayfield when we lost, they stopped our runners. They chopped our runners early doors to get in over the ball, slow the ruck. So if we win collisions, and we're very good at it, we're very accurate at the breakdown, we build huge pressure. But if we lose consecutive collisions, we tend to go into kind of really slow mode, and that's easy. And teams have clocked that. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
When we get momentum, we've got to keep it. And we against certain teams who are physical and strong, they can take that away from us if we run into them.
Okay.
I think some of the defence against us this year in particular has been incredibly accurate, very fast off the line, quite low on some of them, chopping as Eddie said, but stopping us before the gain line. And in some respects I think we've missed out on CJ Stander, and even though he's not getting as far over the gain line as he was 3 or 4 years ago, he is a heavy hit that takes 2 or 3 people out. So if he doesn't get over the gain line, the next guy tended to. And so I think we suffered a little bit with that. I feel at times that, and in the instance that Eddie highlighted, which was with Kilcoyne going down the left wing, the ball was passed, the forward caught it, the forward carried it up. There's nothing dynamic in that. And if the dynamism is coming from the defence, you're going to not get over the gain line. And it becomes very hard once that's stopped once to regenerate that into something fast. And I feel at times when our ball carriers take the ball at pace, if there's 2 there, because the game has changed from it changes every few years, but it's changed. You can't have 1 ball carrier going at 1,000,000 miles an hour carrying it, being tackled. He will be tackled, he will be knocked down. You need to have another guy almost going as fast after him, either for a pop, but more likely to make certain that he wins that ruck. And that can make it very, very fast. I think at that time we happen to be a little bit slow.
Okay, stuff to look out for. Eddie, I don't know if you've seen it, but in the last few hours or so, World Rugby have put out a video, very polished, very good video, I think, to try and wrestle back some of the momentum over the Global League. So it's a full explanation of what we're looking at. In short, if people haven't seen it, there's going to be 3 divisions. The top division will have 12 teams, 2 conferences. So there'll be a Northern Hemisphere conference and a Southern Hemisphere conference, and there'll be the Six Nations effectively as a big part of the Northern Conference. The Southern Hemisphere teams go at it around that time, and then in the summer windows and the November windows, the Northern Hemisphere teams play the Southern Hemisphere teams. Fiji and Japan go in as the 2 undercurrent world rankings in the Southern Hemisphere. So in short, from an Irish point of view, and maybe that's the easiest way to look at it, is from our own point of view. From an Irish point of view, they play the 5 Six Nations games. They would have 3 away games to Southern Hemisphere opposition in the summer, and then they would have 3 home games to the other 3 Southern Hemisphere teams in the autumn. And if things went well, they would then have a semi-final and a final. And that would still mean that issue of potentially 5 consecutive weekends of Tier 1 rugby. In the midst of all that, there'll be Division 2 and Division 3. There will be relegation and promotion playoffs. So say Italy finished up bottom of the Northern Hemisphere conference, then they might play, for instance, Georgia in a playoff as well. In Lions years, that wouldn't happen, to try and free up the calendar a bit, and none of this would happen in World Cup years. So there is promotion, there is relegation. They've mapped things out, 11 regular season games, and then potentially semi-final and final, or else a relegation promotion playoff for other teams. Still some quirks, I'm sure. I don't know. I appreciate Johnny Sexton and others came out very strongly last week. Having looked at the video, I found myself thinking this could very easily be better than what we have now.
Yeah, it could. I think that's still... Well, obviously America has been kicked to the curb now, because that was the initial that America were in with Japan, and that was down to, the thinking was 350 million people as distinct from, 1 million people in Fiji.
Yeah, that will most certainly be on rankings now. So as things stand, Fiji and Japan would be in. Yeah,
no, I still think Samoa and Tonga will feel a bit aggrieved. And I think Georgia will as well, because they're currently ranked above Italy. So there's going to be a bit of bellyache. And I think they have to have the promotion relegation off the bat. If there should be no ring fencing, because the longer you're at the party, the harder it is to get to the party. So I think it's a better proposal. I think the players thing is interesting because, it's an extra couple of games, and Ireland, ironically, are better placed than any country to manage this, because we manage our players from the top down.
Yeah.
So I think England, Wales, France in particular would struggle. But the thing I find interesting about the players complaining is that, and we all agree with the player welfare thing, is that the reason this is all necessary is because we're losing money hand. I say we, the World Rugby is losing money hand over fist. So they're trying to make money, and the big cost to most clubs is player salaries. That's the truth of the matter. So, if players took less money and played less games, they'd be all healthier. But to suggest players get paid less, there'll be carnage. So it's a tricky one. What they're saying is we would need to make more money to pay players more money. And there's no doubt the French league has skewed. There's an inflationary bubble in the market in France. No doubt about that. But I don't think the players have a point. But the point is that the reason this is happening at all is to be able to pay players more money. And that's really the crux of it. The biggest part of the cost of running any club is the player's wage bill. And the clubs foot the bill in France, so the clubs foot the bill in England for that. And that's the tricky part. So I don't think the players have a really strong case. Unless if they want to play 25 games a year, then take a 40% pay cut, and it'll be a lot easier for everybody. Now that's a harsh thing to say, but the problem is money, and the reason the problem is money is we can't afford what we're doing at the moment, and it's a bad business model when you can't afford the wages you're paying.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like in this one, but I don't agree with all of it. And I also thought a lot of the comments that came out during the week were far too premature. And
from the players?
From everybody, actually. It was a huge reaction to the midst of a negotiation. So now we see what this is, and we see that some of this is already very different from what they were complaining about. And I don't think this will fly.
Biggest issue with it?
But I think there's an iteration of it that will fly.
Sure. What's the biggest issue, do you think, with this?
I think in terms of a level of competitive games over a 4-year cycle for top players.
Too many.
Too many. And because it isn't just this, there's European rugby has to fit into this as well.
Oh, I mean, look, the club game, it strikes me as the biggest issue here.
So, yeah. and Eddie discussed about, so financially rugby isn't a sustainable model at the moment. So it's surviving not on hugely increased ticket revenues. It's surviving on uplifts in TV. And that uplift is being translated straight to the players' salaries for the most part, which, do you know what? I have to say it as an ex-player, is as it should be. But it does have to be sustainable. And I look at it, and you mentioned the English teams, the French teams, and the Japanese teams, actually. They are the three awkward markets. They're the ones that make it very difficult to have. You're not looking at a salary cap, but you're looking to have a level of salary that you can do it. So in Ireland, all the provinces have to pay to keep their players in Ireland. And we want to only pick Irish players where at all possible. And it becomes much harder. We have to pay more for Irish players because they can just go to England. Now, I was one of the players that went to England, and I can understand that that's very fine. It was in a different time, and I could still play for Ireland, and it was fine. But in France, they play a huge amount of games. You don't have any control on it. And they're the two groups, England and France, that put huge pressure on everything else. And with all the best will in the world, all these conversations around a world league and everything else will never solve the problem or the issue that happens with the club owners having a different level of control. And we've seen how it's gone with football. A few of them make profit, but the vast majority they're bailed out by
none of them make
people.
profit, yeah.
So that's the reality of it. And I don't know, like rugby isn't as big as soccer, and we can't actually go down that line necessarily. So I looked at it, we only watched this 15 minutes ago before we came on air. I look at that and I said, God, there's a lot I like about it. I would agree with you. But I don't know that I want to play a fully competitive game, that we have to have a full team out every single time. Now, it doesn't matter what the full team is to play all the time. I thought for the first tier, it's difficult in a 4-year cycle. And they were saying, well, it might be only 3 years of the 4 and be slightly modified for the Lions. I think you could modify that again, and this could be 1 year of the 4-year cycle.
Maybe, yeah.
I could see that. But for the second tier and the third tier, I think this is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now, I know that the criticism that will come out on the back of that is, well, that's the first tier ring fencing again. And that is the next big argument. Will the Six Nations teams vote to have relegation or not when all their funding model pretty much comes through that and they wouldn't be at the top table for a while. I think that's a very difficult one to get. But I see merit in it. But I don't, there's so many stakeholders that this is only the part of the process. I actually think it hasn't been rushed. It's taken a long time to get here, but I still think it takes another long time to get to a full sense of agreement, which nobody will be happy with.
Yes,
but
there's too many parties.
Yeah.
It could be a decade away from it.
Well, it could be a couple of years away from it. I mean, this is the first we've seen about it. I do think there's been poor communication from World Rugby. I think that's one of the elements.
But it seems it was leaked, in fairness to them. You know, I don't know how it got out, but it got out. And then they were on the back foot straight away. And then the double whammy of the players coming out against it. And then when you're explaining, you're losing.
But I think in any negotiation, it's not going to be the finished article that goes out. So, you know, having things that are leaked, that's premature anyway.
Sure.
Maybe it's accelerated it.
Joe, another interesting point
Yes, Eddie.
that I think if you have this every year, I agree with Woody, I don't think it's sustainable every year. I think you devalue the World Cup.
It won't happen in World Cup years, obviously, but I accept your point.
My point is, if you have a mini World Cup for 3 years and then a real World Cup, let's be honest, the last 8 teams in the World Cup every 4 years are going to come out of that tournament, realistically. Yeah. So, like, it's hard to hype the World Cup up if every 4 years, like we can now. It's a genuine World Cup. We all look forward to it. It's a 4-year cycle. But then you put 3 mini World Cups in. I don't think that's doable either, because I think it devalues that product. Will people be prepared to pay as much for a World Cup every 4 years that they do now? It's a lot of money. The World Cup runs rugby for the 4 years, World Rugby. Like, that sustains World Rugby for 4 years. If the value of that drops, and then we're trying to make it back every other 3 years on a mini World Cup, like, I don't know financially if that even stacks up.
Yeah.
But if we go back on that again, I mean, this is World Rugby trying to reaffirm control of its game, and they fund every part of the game. You know, this isn't as if this is money that's been stored in a company somewhere. This is the body that is comprised of all the unions in the world, right? So this is for the World Game. So, I mean, I think there's merit there, and something has to be done, because the game is not sustainable. And we're only talking financially here, and it isn't sustainable financially unless something changes. So I think this is a really good start, but but there are glaring issues
problems and issues and
Yeah.
stakeholders that aren't going to be happy one way or another. Just before we go, because the clock's coming against us, it's a similar theme, I suppose. Wales are trying to sort out their regions and sort out their game. The very latest is that Scarlets have released a statement today saying the Ospreys Scarlets unification is very much off. I mean, it really is interesting. So if you up until today, you would have thought Ospreys were the poor victims in all this. But according to Scarlets, they say it was very much something Ospreys wanted. They are saying that the regions have been driving this change. So in late December, the Ospreys made what the Scarlets call a high-level approach to explore the option of a merger. And then they went and talked to somebody else, and then they came back to the Scarlets, and then heads of terms were agreed and signed by both the Ospreys and Scarlets on March the 1st. And now the Ospreys have changed their mind, according to the Scarlets. The merger is off, so we don't really know where the whole thing is. The initial plan seemed to be that they were happy to have Cardiff and the Dragons to have a merger between Ospreys and Scarlets, and then to have a team in the north of Wales. So I don't know. There's just not enough money in the Welsh region, seems to be obviously a problem, and this is a bit of a mess. It's quite extraordinary Wales are on the cusp of a Grand Slam in the midst of it all.
And it's extraordinary that we still don't have all the information on this. I'm waiting now for Osprey's press release to come back.
I think that'll be good reading.
Right, that could be interesting because so the view was that this was Welsh Rugby wanted there to be a team in the north.
And
actually,
the regions were almost victims here. But the Scarlets is saying the regions have driven
this is different. And actually the reaction from the PBR, which was I think PRB, there you go, was that, and they'd all agreed that Ospreys, they'd all signed something different, that's what it was. It's a mess, like it's a total mess, and kind of, it's a little bit embarrassing, and but this used to happen all the time. I mean, I have to tell you, there's none of this new, and I think Eddie will talk about that. Back in the early 90s, when the game was on that sort of grey area before it went to professionalism, and then when it started, I mean, every single thing became this huge fight. There was fights and threats of strikes left, right and centre because the game wasn't mature enough and hadn't got itself into professionalism. I think we're still suffering from little bits of that, but when the pressure comes on, and financially the regions in Wales are not doing very well. So the reason, apparently, I don't know whether it's true, but I read it over the last few days, was that Cardiff were going to join up with the Ospreys, but both of them had too much debt. Right. But I've no idea whether that's true either. You know, so it's difficult, and it's amazing that it seems as if the Welsh players just seem to be finding their happy place when they go and play with Wales, because it's all this stuff happening in the background.
It's like you summoned it with your mind. Incoming Ospreys chairman Rob Davies has just released a statement in the last 20 minutes. I'll try and race through the abridged notes. It just adds to the mess, really. He says, there are three stark realities. Firstly, the concept of an Ospreys-Scarlets merger is dead, and the clock is ticking. He says, secondly, Wales was promised a comprehensive review with nothing off the table, but nothing has yet been put on the table. He says, thirdly, the PRB cynically left it to the regions to have a shootout for survival, with the clear direction that a region in the west should go to make room for a fourth in the north. We are now where we are as a result. He says it's hard to look at this situation and not conclude that a stitch-up of convenience has just unravelled before us all. There is no plan B. There was never a plan A. This is good stuff, actually. It is now time for the grown-ups to get back in the room. It's time for experienced strategic planning, robust consultation and a methodical process to emerge that is transparent, timely and carries with it the full range of the sports stakeholders. And that is what I will be discussing with the union and PRB officials over the coming days. So he says there, nothing but a shootout for survival amongst the regions. You go figure it out yourselves there.
Yeah, there'll be more coming on the back of that too. But that is the nature of the game. So when you look at it in the English Premiership, Exeter made a profit last year.
Pretty much it. Yeah.
When you look at the amount of money that has been put into the Premiership since the start of the game, I can't remember what the number was, but it's a very, very large number. And the amount of losses that stemmed over the last few years were in the region of 40 million across the leagues. That's not a sustainable model. So it's we just want to have it in a situation where this can be a proper business. Businesses make profit, where you can look after your players properly, both financially and body-wise, welfare-wise. And I think at times everybody, and this is where I think the initial reaction from the players came from, was every time they look at doing something else to make more money, it involves more games or more high-intensity games. And that at some stage, something's going to break.
Yeah, I mean, it seems Wales traditionally have just had an issue with this. Neath and Swansea, it's never quite caught on, understandably.
The fans didn't.
Yeah, and so that's the issue with money. Like, how often do we flick on a Pro 14 game in Wales and there's literally nobody there? Like, there seem to be Welsh fans who will support their own club that they've grown up with and support Wales.
Yeah.
And the regions, it's a bit makey-uppy for us in part. So I don't know how they sort all that out. In the midst of it all, Eddie, before we go, clock really is against us. Wales go to Murrayfield. I think Finn Russell's back. Stuart Hogg not quite back yet. Scotland have a decent record at Murrayfield, but Wales are going for a Grand Slam. How do you see that one?
I don't think Scotland are a particularly good side even when everyone's on deck. I think they're struggling with their confidence now after the way the season has gone from. And I think Wales will get them. I don't see any. I think Wales smell a Grand Slam here.
Yeah.
Since the night in Paris where they got out of jail, you know, they got a gift in Paris. They recalibrated. They went to Italy and they targeted the England game, and they know where they want to be. I mean, they could slip up, but it's Wales to slip up here, not Scotland. They're going to do something to beat them. Because I think they smell a Grand Slam, and fair to the Welsh, when they get a sniff of a Grand Slam, they rarely leave behind them.
That's true.
So I don't see that one going any other way than Wales unless Wales screw it up, and I can't imagine them doing it now. They'll fancy Ireland coming to Wales as well, no matter what we do against France.
Gents, we're way out of time. Eddie, thanks a million, and Keith Wood, thank you for coming to the studio.
Pleasure, Joe.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.